Yeah, Matt, don't leave.
Get a little bit better light. How you doing, Herschel?
I'm good, man. I'm here. I was listening to my J.D. Greer sermon all over again.
Nice.
You guys are so smart naming your organizations on there. CMF, World Venture. See, rename myself.
Full disclosure, I think I did that about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, the dash is a good idea too. Youth. Seth, where are you?
I am based out of Indianapolis.
Okay, wow. Nice drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And welcome to the Dash gang.
Yeah, I'm
Happy
learning.
to have you.
Thanks. Oh, we're going to begin. The clock is a little intimidating for me. Kara, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Baylor's my alma mater, so.
It can't be. Your last name is Letourneau. It should not be your alma mater.
Yeah, well, you know, they told me that the girls' saying at Letourneau University was that the odds were good, but the goods were odd. So I decided my odds were better at Baylor.
Much better, much better. And I think you told me that before. I think I met you at Letourneau or somewhere else.
Yeah.
The goods are definitely on. Abby, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah. Excited for this. Don't know what to expect.
Nor do I, but I'd rather talk than just sit here and stare at everybody. So I'm sorry, I'm greeting everybody. Hi, Savannah Green, whoever you are.
Did any of y'all join in anything earlier today?
No, but I thought about it 10 minutes ago, Abby.
So did I.
I did too.
Same. I was like, shoot, should I have done that? Yeah.
One of my coworkers was at the stuff this morning and she said it was mostly students.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
You know, it'll be interesting to see if there's more people from orgs here or more students here.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to expect.
Well, if it's anything like any virtual conference I've been to, I'm praying it's not. How's that?
Yeah, Herschel, now you got me worried about the clock. Do all the students just appear when it gets down to 0?
I don't know. We'll see. But we're being recorded, so I feel good about this.
Right. Don't say anything incriminating.
I usually will. Oh my gosh. It's down to 5 seconds.
Go.
Yeah, I don't know where this is being streamed either. It's kind of intimidating, but who knows? It'll be fine.
Oh, I've got friends on the call. I'm good.
The same thing that happens at church, you know, gets down to 0 and we just reset it. Add 2 minutes to the clock.
If this is church, I'm going to get my coffee now that it's at 0. Like, that's my cue.
There we go.
Kara's going to get hers now.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I had my coffee so I wouldn't fall asleep first. Oh.
It was all intimidation. I was intimidated
by it, bro.
We're running a lean shop here, so we are excited to get things popping now. And now we're trying to connect Zoom to the mix because I want to see all of you all as well. So I've been listening, by the way.
Oh no.
Robbie didn't say anything bad about you.
Oh, no, no problem. Thank you all so much for
That was you
joining.
that said that, wasn't it?
What was that?
I'm joking.
Oh, oh, thank you all so much as we figure this out and figure out our new normal. So I'm excited to be here. If you can't tell, I'm a bit hot from moving and the lights don't help. But thank you all so much for joining us. We have a couple of people joining in on our Zoom call, so I'm going to go ahead and let them in as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So with that being said, hello, everyone. And thank you all for tuning in to our kickoff panel. We have some great panelists here. So I will just go across my screen at least and to just, request that each of you all introduce yourself and your organization just as we kick off our panel today. Does that sound good? All right. Let's kick it off with Seth.
All right. Good morning, afternoon. I'm on Eastern time, so I guess it's afternoon. My name is Seth. I work with CMF International. I am based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And I have the privilege of overseeing our young adult and college student summer internship program at CMF. So I'm excited about this panel because that's kind of what I do every day is help prepare young adults and college students for shorter term trips and for engaging with intercultural ministry. So yeah, really excited to chat with everyone and excited for this week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Matt Prine.
Yeah, my name is Matt Prine. I am the Global Engagement Coordinator for a missions agency called World Venture. We're based out of Denver, Colorado, but I am a Texan, bred and born. I live in Central Texas, just north of Bryan College Station. And my role is to connect with churches, connect with people who are interested in going and serving overseas, to try and figure out how we can best equip people to go. So, but yeah, like Seth, I'm excited about this as well.
Sounds good. All right. And Herschel?
Hey, my name is Herschel Rothschild. I'm with SIM, and my family and I served in Nigeria for a couple of years working with street kids. My role as regional director, South Central Regional Director, is to help find people that want to go short-term, intermediate, and long-term, because we have people that have been overseas for over 20 years, and use God's calling for his glory.
Thank you so much. All right. And Kara? There we go. We hear you. Oh, we did for a moment.
Sorry. Okay. This technology, we've been doing it for so long. I should have this down by now, right? My name is Kara Letourneau. I work with Children's Relief International as the team mobilizer. So my job is similar to some of these other guys have said, to plan and recruit for short-term trips that we do. Our mission statement is to take the light of Christ to the poorest of the poor of our time. So we work in 8 countries around the world in communities of deep poverty. So I plan all of our trips for that. And I'm a Baylor grad, so Sikkim.
Hey, Sikkim Bears. We have a Sikkim in the house. And next up, let's go with Reagan.
Hi, my name is Reagan Engelhart. I'm serving with Village Schools International. My role was that I taught overseas with them in Tanzania and Zambia for 5 years. And I just recently moved back almost a year ago, and now I'm a board member. And so my role is to talk about it like we're doing now and kind of make sure that the organization always stays on their founding principles.
Thank you. And next, we're going to pass it over to Abby.
Hey, my name is Abby Brockleman, and I'm based out of the Dallas area, and I work for an organization called CRISTAR. I'm one of the directors of mobilization for CRISTAR. My husband and I get to do that together. And so we, our goal is to find and identify people who want to be a part of taking the gospel to the least reached around the world. CRISTAR focuses on reaching least reached Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims and other Asians worldwide. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel and talking about how to prepare for short term.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. So to kick us off, our overall goal here was to just highlight some top things that we wanted to share with students to consider before serving on a mission trip. So first and foremost, I would just love to go around the table. Not everyone has to necessarily put in, just so we can mix in a couple of different questions. But if there was one thing, for those of you that have served on mission or are familiar with the experience, what's the one thing that you wish you would have known before you entered into your first trip? And that could be something that you may have been primed to and were informed, or there could have been something that you learned kind of in that process or when you finally went. But would anyone like to kick us off with what was one thing?
Yeah, it's not about me, meaning it's not about you either. It's about him. And if we think it's about what we're going to do when we go there, we're gonna miss it. It's about what God's going to do in us and through us. So we need to be leaning into him and trusting him for strength to get through each day, to trust and see what God's doing there and join in the work he's doing. So focus on God, point to God, and rely on his strength and his wisdom to do what you're called to do. But it's not me that's going to change someone's life. God's going to use me if I let him know.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone else?
Yeah, I think I would add to that is go as a learner. I think so often we get this idea that we're going to go and we're going to accomplish some task or get something done or change the world in this 10-day trip. And the reality is that we need to go to be a student of culture, to be a student of what God's doing in that particular context that we're entering into for that short time. So yeah, go with this posture that I'm going to learn something rather than I've got to give something.
Yeah, I would definitely second both of those answers for sure. And then on a bit more tangible, practical level, I think the biggest thing that I learned as I grew after my first mission trip, and I even went on several trips at Baylor with the BRH choir. And one of the things that I feel like we did really well there is just the training and the debrief, just really leaning into that and coming back and continuing to engage in the work that you were part of, continuing to stay plugged in and really just processing through what you've experienced on the field. I think it can be, I think people are oftentimes surprised by how difficult it is to re-enter back into the country after a short-term trip.
Yeah, one thing I would add, another practical thing, according to what Matt and Herschel were saying, is to read the book When Helping Hurts. I wish that I had read that before I ever went on any short-term trips. And I think it would have even maybe helped me determine what is a good short-term trip for me to be a part of. So that's a really practical thing. And then also just preparing with prayer. Praying for the yourself as you go, the team, the work that you're going to do, maybe the long-term workers that you're going to participate with, and praying for anybody that you might interact with. I think prayer can be laying the foundation for the work that's going to happen. And if we fail to pray, then we fail to be in tune with what God is doing.
Thank you. And with that in mind, that makes me think about, I love it how you were saying, how do we care and how do we serve in a mindset of not harming others? So how do we go with this good intention, but also the expectation to do no harm? And that's one of the big things that we focus on as far as our preparation period for Baylor mission trips. So kind of as you all were sharing, for some folks that may be aware, we're kicking off our process now to for students to start applying for teams, but it's really big for us to get that team identified so they can build relationships with one another, but also so that they can fully prepare and to really reflect on what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it and how do they connect with the community. So with that in mind, I would love to just hear some thoughts about how do you intentionally prepare to go and to serve particular communities, and to really think about some tangible ways in which we can not harm that community, but to truly only do good. as much as possible?
I would say start by learning about those people and finding out what their needs are, and seeing what they're already doing. What are their skills that they have? What are the resources that they have? What are things that they could even do for themselves?
Yeah, Reagan, I like what you said. What are some things that they could do for themselves? And this is addressed in When Helping Hurts, but this idea of empowerment rather than handout ministry, I really think that's a vital piece. So that way, it's equipping people to be able to, meet the needs of the community and their own family. It's a great thought.
Yeah, I think mission short-term trips meet justified criticism sometimes, but I do think that they can be done really well and can be done in a way that doesn't hurt. And one of the ways that I think is really one of the things that's really important to consider is partnering with national leaders and national partners. So like, for example, with CRI, that's one of our huge values is all of our projects around the world are run by people who are from that country, who live there, who have grown up there. And I think just empowering the local community to really take ownership and coming alongside and partnering with them and seeing it as a partnership instead of hey, we're just going to come in and drop in and give you some food, maybe build you a building, paint a couple walls, and then we're going to leave. No, like there has to be a relationship there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally agree with everything you guys have said. I think I would also add, in my experience, every bit of language and culture that I've learned ahead of time or intentionally tried to learn while I was there comes in super handy on a personal level, but also it is a different posture when even if you suck at the language, but you're really trying and you're asking questions, and you've picked up a few words before you've gotten there, and maybe your pronunciation is a little bit off, but you've spent time working on the language. That says to the people that you're working with, hey, I value you and I want to speak to you on your terms and not ask you to come to my terms and speak to me and, ask you to acclimate to my culture, even though I'm the guest in your culture. So I think trying to understand some different values, different greetings, learning as many words and phrases that you can pick up, and then being intentional about those things while you're on a trip, even in a short time, you'd be surprised how much you can learn and how much that process of learning does enforce a lot of those postures that people have already mentioned of serving and empowering. It starts with those really basic language and cultural pieces that can then open doors to see that the huge things that God is going to teach both you and teach the people that you're working with through that. So
Thank you, Seth. I've heard a theme of relationships. So I think when we think about just being able to go and connect with others, like human connection at its core, being one of those main pillars, I would just love to just kind of take a side moment to ask for one or two folks to share one particular experience of a relationship that they encounter with someone that they really, it's one of those salient memories. And I feel like we have a lot of memories, but could anyone share just one memory of an encounter with how they develop a relationship with one individual or a few individuals while serving on mission that was pretty meaningful for them?
So here's one of the crazy things. I went there to serve and minister, but really by the ones that were serving us. I mean, the guy that I used to buy vegetables from in Nigeria is someone who I was able to pour into his life and help lead to faith before it was all over with. But it was no one I thought I was going there to minister to, right? I mean, it was literally someone I just did life with and bought vegetables and produce from and just talked to. And just by doing life with them and having conversations, and people don't care what you know till they know that you care, which I've heard again and again through this conversation, just in other words. And you love them where they are. And you partner with the local church or local ministry. So when you leave, it's not gone. It's not done. There's other people that are there taking on and keeping the work going. So, I mean, it's just really, look at all the relationships. It's not just about the people you're going to serve. It might even be on the flight over. You don't know who you're going to have a conversation with in the airport or who's sitting next to you. Be open to what God's doing.
Yeah, I definitely have I mean, I could think of a dozen stories and relationships right off the top of my head. And some of the richest relationships that I have come from these overseas trips and stuff. And I just love my international friends. But one that's really cool actually has to do with a Baylor trip. My first mission trip was to Ghana, and I stayed connected to two people that I met there. And they had been dating, and I kept in touch with them before. This was before Facebook and everything, and they were not together anymore. And one of my trips with BRH Choir at Baylor was to go back to Ghana, completely unrelated to this same ministry. And I was able to find them, reconnect with them. I'd stayed in touch with them enough that they both came to visit me and hear a concert that we were doing in Ghana. And they're now married and have 2 kids. And I was invited to their wedding. And so these really are long-term relationships that can be built even just from a short-term trip. And I just love that that reality. So.
Thank you. So with that in mind, as we think about things to know, I think it's also helpful to highlight some of the challenges that also come in some of those not so ideal experiences as well. And I'll go first as far as just even sharing one of my experiences. So again, serving the Baylor missions on our first in line trip with Casas por Cristo. And we had a day. So one aspect of it, we talk about, really doing things that are meaningful. When I say we were building a house, we were really building a house in the middle of summer. But it was so great, and it was so many valuable relationships that came out of that and just experiences. But basically, our first day was like a day. It was like torrential rain. I mean, like downpour. So then we couldn't even drive the van closer to the home site because we were going to get stuck. So then we had to park the van somewhere, and then we had to walk down to the site, which was a little hike, and it was fine. It was like, hey, we're here, sir, blank, blank, blank. We get to it, have a good day. Covered in mud. After a while, the rain, you don't even care about the mud anymore. Like, you're already wet. You are it's covered. It's over with. But we get back to the van. We're heading out, and it was like, wow, that was a good day, but I'm glad it's over right now, so we can go back and just shower. And then our truck got stuck in the mud, and we had to push the truck out of the mud. So that's when I was like, Lord. But there was such a humbling feeling for me, because it reminded me that it's not about me, and it's not about what I want in life or how I want it to happen, but it's the cards that we're given. And we have to understand that when we lean on our faith, that we're covered and we're taken care of. And we were able to get out of that, get out of the mud just fine. It took some effort and a couple of folks to push the van out. But I think that was just one of those moments where I had to check myself, because it wasn't this ideal experience where everything is fun, everything goes well, and it's great. So with that in mind, I think we want to share, what are some of the unexpected experiences that some of you all may have had. So if I could have one or two people share as well, just kind of what were some of those moments for you all?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we got to keep in mind when we go on short-term trips is we're going to places that are not like the U.S. And I would say not like the U.S. in a spiritual climate. Here I think we've so numbed ourselves to the spiritual that we can't discern it. I think it was my second year in Mozambique, and we were doing a discipleship camp and interacting with young people, teaching them the Bible using chronological Bible storying, and just the presence of evil spirits. And it's so, I can't even begin to verbalize what you feel when you encounter something like that. But I think kind of being ready to some degree, studying up on spiritual warfare before you go, especially if the context you're going to is going to be one that's filled with that. I mean, which spiritual warfare is going to be anywhere. It's going to manifest itself differently. But I think, being ready to encounter what the Lord's going to put in front of you, and just relying on the power of the Holy Spirit. That was the thing when we came face to face with that, just allowing the Spirit to lead and guide, because I had no clue what to do. But thank God that he was he was faithful to kind of lead us through that.
I would say there are definitely physical things that we can encounter that will throw us off and be different. And sometimes we find things within ourselves an experience within ourselves that is surprising. And I think during my time, I saw a lot of my sin revealed. And someone had said it earlier, be a learner. Absolutely be a learner. I think I kind of went over thinking I knew a lot and I knew what was right because I came from a well educated country, and that was wrong. And so if you find pride within yourself, if you're finding that you think you know what's best, that's not of God, and you need to put a stop to it.
Thank you. And with that in mind, I think that just makes me think about the humility piece. So as we talk about, just going in with a humble spirit and being very mild in our interactions and graceful in everything that we do, that just makes me think about what is it that we can encourage students as they understand what their role is as they go and serve, but how do they empower others around them? So I think it's one piece of that journey for us to think about. But specifically, I'm thinking about like team leaders or those that want to, spread the gospel, but also to encourage others. Is there any advice as far as a tip that you would share with students that are sharing these messages and encouraging their peers or recruiting their peers to come and serve with them? Is there any advice that anyone would like to give?
Yeah, I think the best mobilizers are the people who are going and who are saying, hey, I'm going to do this, come with me to do this with me. And so if there are students who are looking to go on a short-term trip, you have a great opportunity to influence others to do that with you. And then as you return, to think about how you can carry forward what you've learned together and hold each other accountable to that as well. One thing when I've led any kind of short-term trip that I encourage people to do is to think through like a long version of how their trip was and how their summer was, let's say, and then a little bit shorter one for people who have a shorter attention span, and then an even shorter one that's like a Twitter version, so only so many characters, and that they can just share, that has a really significant piece of what they learned, and might spark further conversations, but could be just left with that one Twitter post, basically. So those are some things I would encourage people to do to challenge and encourage others.
Yeah, I think along those lines, one of the things at CMF that is one of our core values is team. And I'm sure it's very similar for a lot of other agencies being represented this week, is teams are really important. And that's for the intern teams that I get to work with. So anywhere from like 2 to 15, or for your long-term missionaries on teams, or even for your short-term trip. Team is very important, and it's a harder context. It's a harder road to be on a team and be a good part of a team, but I think it's better in the long run. So I think trying to have those hard conversations even before you leave, if you're on the plane, if you're doing trainings, and being honest when you're recruiting and talking to people, I think being honest about maybe some of your fears, or people, when they talk about this conversation, maybe you're really pumped up and about this idea, and maybe your friends or your roommates just don't quite get it. They don't have maybe the same energy level. I think being honest about where you are and some of the things that are, scary about it, some of the fears your family maybe has about this idea, especially now with a global pandemic, fear is just everywhere. You can cut it with a knife. And so I think one huge way to deal with fear and to deal with, recruiting and how do you encourage others to be a part of your team is having those hard conversations and grounding it within the relationship of a team through prayer, through fellowship, and through time together, and being honest with your expectations, and having those conversations beforehand. I think then, when you, not even if, but when you encounter a difficulty, if you already have a strong team that you've built around you and honest conversations and relationships that you can lean back on and rely on, that's going to, you're preparing in advance for adversity when you're investing in a team relationship and having accountability around you. So I think that's a huge part of it, is who would you want on that team, and how could you encourage them through honesty, through prayer, through fellowship to think about joining you, and being honest with that.
I think when you see that the goal is going, and you know people that you would love to go with you, going off what Seth said, you just show them the excitement. I mean, the Bible will come to life in a whole new way after you go serve Him on mission. Depending on where you go, it'll come in different ways. Whether you see buildings that look like they were built thousands of years ago, whether they were just built 5 years ago or not. It's just the construction is different. You see people living in a room. I mean, I'm in a study that's like 10 by 10, but there may be 10 people living in this room, depending on what country you're in. You're going to experience life in a whole new way, and God will come out of His box, and it'll just be a new experience. And that's what you want to do. You want to be excited, show them the joy, and just the trust you have to have. What a faith building experience. And don't be afraid. Do not be afraid of support raising, because God's calling you and God's going to supply your needs.
Thank you. With that in mind, I think, Seth, you also just mentioned some of the aspects of, one, being honest and transparent, but also we've already talked about accepting the unknowns when we go out into things. So as you mentioned, we're in a global pandemic, not even a national pandemic, but a global pandemic. So how has COVID-19 impacted your organizations, and whether that specifically your organization as an operations, or maybe the communities in which your organization serves? I think that's valuable information as we talk about these stories and the things that we're doing, because I think oftentimes as we think about this kind of self-preservation, sometimes for me, I think sometimes it can be a privilege to be like, oh, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to go into my home and do this. But we also acknowledge we have to flatten the curve, and we have to keep communities safe. And the last thing we want to do is to also further jeopardize the health and well-being of other communities. So I think that really puts us into a unique space as we explore missions work. So I would just love to hear, and I think the people will be very interested in hearing just how has COVID impacted your organizations.
Yeah. So like I said, my title is team mobilizer. It's kind of hard to mobilize teams in the middle of a pandemic. But the good thing about the way that our organization is set up is that we do have those national leaders that are on the ground and that we partner with. And so they're there, they're citizens of those countries. And so our work has not stopped in any way, shape, or form on the ground in these places. And we're just having to kind of reimagine how we connect people here with that work. And so there are some cool things that we've been able to do. We're doing Facebook Live updates with our partners on the field. And so I've gotten to hear some of the stories of the ways that they've been helping with this. We did a big COVID relief fund, because what we're finding in a lot of these places, especially since CRI is specifically focused in communities of deep poverty, is people are actually more afraid of dying of hunger than they are of dying of COVID. And so there are all of these secondary issues that are coming up in these developing countries where the cost of food has doubled and their income has been cut in half or more. And so the need is so great. And it can be really easy, I think, in times like Seth was talking about with fear, just really penetrating every part of our lives, for us to just recoil and want to take care of ourselves and really just focus on our own needs. But the needs that we're experiencing are also being felt around the world, and then to an even greater and more extreme degree. And so leaning in right now, in whatever way that looks like, whether that's through just becoming aware, through giving financially as you can, through signing up to go on a trip as soon as you can, as soon as they open up. It's really important now more than ever, because there's so much need that we're seeing around the world, especially during this time.
Yeah, for Christar, like Kara was saying, all of our short-term trips are in conjunction with our long-term workers, and many of them have stayed in their countries of service. Some have come home during the pandemic, but for us, we continue to plan short-term opportunities. It's yet to be seen if all the countries that we'd like to send people for short-term will be open for that in the next year But with that, we also have teams that are here in North America who are also working with least reached peoples that are here, whether they're immigrants or refugees. And so we're also working with them on short-term opportunities if it's not possible for people to leave the country.
Thank you all so much. So the floor is open for any folks that are on our Zoom session that would love to pose any questions. We have a couple more minutes before we end this section for Missions Week. So the floor is open for questions if others wanted to share. But while we await questions via Zoom or social media, we're happy to yield any of those. I think one thing that we think about, or at least I think about, is how do we adapt in times of change? And I feel like if there's anything that we've had to learn and figure out now is how do we adapt? And that's in a variety of settings, but especially in missions work and being flexible and adaptable. So I would just love to hear, I think it'd be valuable to share, how would you share kind of how has your experience adapted over the last 5 years, whether that's with your current organization or multiple different organizations, but how could you share how has your experience and connections to missions work kind of adapted and evolved over the last 5 years? I know that was an off the cuff one there, so no pressure.
Oh, no mic drop. I like that, Seth. Mic drop. Hey, so over the last 5 years, I mean, I came from being a field missionary back to working out of the U.S. office. I'd much rather be overseas. Let me not lie to you, but God clearly called us there. God clearly called us back. It's a faith journey. I mean, knowing that God can call me overseas was awesome. I never thought he would be the one that called me back. I thought I got to make that decision, but it's not. So it's continuing to evolve and trust him and bloom literally where I'm planted. I'd rather be overseas. No lies. I love it, but God's got me here. So I need to be joyful about that and be excited about that and lean into him and trust him in that and be used for his glory. That's true involvement right there for me.
Yeah, I think adaptability is one of the most important things. And I mean, geez, in the last 5 years, I could write a book on how much I've been asked to adapt. And you know, it's really cool. But I think some of the things we've already mentioned, for me, it's been starting out with this journey of I want to do missions, I want to do intercultural ministry, of that being a me-centered thing to then my eyes kind of being opened and expanded to see the bigger picture that I think God a lot of times has, and to see the needs of different communities. I got to live for a summer in Nairobi, Kenya, working in a slum community. And I mean, those 8 weeks alone caused me to adapt and change my worldview and perspective so much. And I think it's, for me, I've recognized that the adaptability piece it's a both and thing. So just as Herschel said, it's not a only overseas thing, and it's also not an only here in the States thing. Right now I'm in seminary and I'm kind of working full time and getting the training piece, like a lot of students that hopefully tuning in, you know, are as well. You're studying your craft, you're trying to learn, you're in that phase of learning. So being adaptable there is important. But in that phase right now, yes, I've been wanting to go overseas full time and make this move for 7-8 years. But God's asked me to be adaptable and be present where I am. And one of the ways practically that for me that's been really cool is it's encouraged me to actually start to recognize the refugee and immigration population around my own city here in Indianapolis. So I have the awesome opportunity to volunteer with an organization that works with refugees and immigrants. And I realize I've done all these things overseas and I get to be a part of panels and conversations like this. But how hypocritical would it be for me to tell everyone how great it is to go overseas and meet people and love people that are far away, when God has brought so many people that are far away to here to be our neighbors. So I think that's one of the ways that adaptability, as I've tried to be faithful to that and still mess it up pretty often, I've recognized, okay, it's not just that I will be serving overseas in the future. It's not that I have this calling in the future, but it's also right now God's asking me to be present. And especially with COVID, maybe loving the immigrants and refugees in my city is the only contact I'll have with someone not from the United States originally, for the foreseeable future. And I think that's enough. I think that's something that we should all be, wherever you are as a Baylor student, staff, faculty member, wherever you are, how can you be present now and recognize that those opportunities to go on a trip, maybe they're going to be different because a lot of things are different. But the call to obedience and the call to be faithful and present and recognize the marginalized will never change, regardless of all those other changing pieces.
Yeah, I think that the biggest shift for me, as I was in seminary and shifted into this role, I went into seminary expecting to go overseas, kind of like Herschel said, like, I'd rather be overseas. But God really just really highlighted for me the opportunity for discipleship through missions and through these short-term trips. And so I think just the biggest adaptability thing that I've learned over the last few years has just been the important role that it can play to be a connector between the people here at home and the people overseas, and the need that we see over there. And really, it's just been a huge privilege and honor to get to walk with people and help them learn and grow and be discipled through these short-term trips, and seeing the way that God's working not only in these projects that are going on, with CRI 24/7, 365 days a year, but seeing how God is also using that work to transform the lives of people who are willing to go and say yes.
Wow, that was great. I think that's a great way for us to wrap up. And also, I love the emphasis on kind of blooming where you're planted. I heard someone share that. And loving where you live. So, I think as we think about this and just being adaptable in everything that we do, keeping those things in mind and understanding that we are the individuals that are called to do this work. And we think about what is it that we're doing and how we are called. I think it's also important to understand how that can't waver, as we've already stated. So that's why we try to figure out new and creative ways to do things. So even if that's, I don't necessarily know exactly what, a virtual missions fair, missions week looks like, but however, to do nothing is not an option. So really always to think about what is it that we can do and to continue to do things like that. We also do have some virtual simulations this week. So for students that are joining us, specifically highlighting just some of the undocumented experiences and immigrant and refugee experiences, specifically in Texas as well. At the Texas and U.S. border, we have a really unique experience for our students to participate in. So feel free to join and save yourself a seat for that, and continue to tag us on social media and comment and join us throughout the week as we come in live with various experiences and conversations such as this. And each evening, we're also going to have opportunities to connect directly with some of our partners. So thank you all so much for joining us and being with us. We're so excited to have you all as we kick off our missions week. And thank you all so much for joining us. It's great.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for hosting in the midst of uncertain times. It's nice to be able to do some of this anyways.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. You're the man, Dom. You're the man.
Teamwork makes a dream work.
Dominic, we all need that t-shirt, brother.
I like it. Coffee with the mission.
Yes.
I can get you all t-shirts. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See ya.